Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Midcurve Podcast. It is your usual cast of characters. We are here and it is Thursday, June 22nd. There's a big event coming up this weekend in the world of NFTs. The Azuki event is happening, and we're going to check in with a couple of people that are actually headed there. At least one person's headed there. Other than that, there's a lot of crazy things have been going on. Bitcoin, BlackRock, all sorts of other things. But before we get started, let's do quick intros. I'm going to start with Grant, and we'll do these fast because Grant's got to leave early so we can catch a flight. Grant, give us your fast intro, and then we'll move on from this as quick as we can.
Hey guys, my name is Grant. I've been in the space for 2 years now. I come from the consulting world, and now I fuck around on Discord all day, which is, I guess, a big step up.
Great. All right. Sadie's here with us, who's feeling a little under the weather, but her voice sounds fine, even though she thought it didn't. Sadie, give us your quick intro.
You're very kind, Funky. I appreciate you. I am Sadie. I spend far too much time DJing, and during the day, I am a financial services private equity investor, and I buy and sell and hopefully make money on insurance companies, banks, asset managers, etc.
But not NFTs right now. Let's be clear. It's very hard to make some money on NFTs. We'll get into that, though. All right, Eric, why don't you do a quick intro?
Hey guys, it's Eric. I was a former TradFi weirdo for a long time, and now I am a full-time Web3 weirdo.
Great. My name is Gavin /Funky Donk. I am a media person involved in all sorts of stuff, including AI, and have probably been the least successful member of Midcurve in a financial standpoint, probably across the board. So don't need to listen to me for advice. I'm here to kind of make the conversation run smoothly as much as possible. Let us jump in here. Let's jump in. And I think it's probably worth starting with, Grant, before you go, I want to talk Azuki. So maybe let's start there, just in case we run over in this other conversation, because I do want to talk about BlackRock coming into the Bitcoin ETF, because I think both Sadie and Eric will have interesting things to say. But let's start with Azuki. And also we can get into apes a little bit, because I think the other big NFT story right now is that the Bored Ape Yacht Club seems like it's run adrift, or what's a good nautical metaphor for this? It is, the boat is leaking slightly. So let's start with Azuki. Grant, you are headed to Las Vegas for the Azuki event. What's your thoughts right now on where Azuki sits? Obviously, there was the story this week, which I think kind of got overblown, of the person that worked for or was employed by Azuki and then tried to launch an Ordinals project, and then it turned out that there was stolen art, a bunch of stuff. But I'm kind of more interested in your thoughts in how Azuki sits kind of going into this event this weekend.
Probably, there's good and bad. Like, expectations are sky high, and, a lot of things are probably priced in, and there's some things that probably aren't priced in, but they take, let's just say, more time to deliver. Irrespective of that, I think, it's been a while since there's been a really solid just IRL experience that people can gravitate to, because, as much as it is online communities and whatnot, people, especially from the boomer crowd like you or I, tend to anchor, our memories and our nostalgic sense of belonging to some of these, like, in real life experiences, right? And it's been, well over a year since something like that. In fact, the last one was pretty much Azuki and a little bit Ape Fest, if you enjoy Amy Schumer, I guess. Yeah, it should be fun. I think, there's a couple of things to be aware of. Like, there's, even though Yuga's going through a death spiral, the collection that actually has the most volume on Blend, which is, I guess, a good indicator for margin trading, is actually Azuki and Beans. Those are the top two collections right now. So should be a volatile weekend, to say the least, price-wise.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I bet there's maybe even people that are picking them up just to go to the event in some way, but I guess you can't do that. The bigger and most important question, Grant, is what are you wearing? Because as we all know, you can only wear dope shit to this event. Do you have your outfit picked out already?
I do not, because I need to pack still. But yeah.
What is a Grant night out?
It's because Grant only wears dope shit. Funky.
Yeah,
okay, there you go.
it's gonna be a silk Versace shirt that has all the buttons removed, because there is no buttoning up that shirt, and then some Cuban links, and probably some very flashy Gucci Bermuda shorts.
Oh my
And
God, I can't
yeah,
wait. I would love
yeah.
to meet. I've never met Grant. I've really never met any of the people in this podcast, but I would love to meet Grant for the first time, and that's the outfit he was wearing. But I would love him also to be the person that I imagine him to be, which is the opposite of that person that would wear that outfit. So it would just be fun to see him have to wear that outfit. That's where my brain is at right now. But
He actually was wearing that exact outfit at NFT NYC, and you missed it. So
oh
Yeah.
my God, damn it, Grant, you you dastardly devil. That's unbelievable.
I bought all those clothes on a firm, and I got liquidated on those.
So you don't exist anymore. Eric, you're also an Azuki holder. Are you going, Eric?
No, I gotta fly out to Vancouver on Saturday, so I will
Right.
unfortunately be missing it, but I will be there in spirit and also in front of my screen trading it like a maniac.
Yeah. So what do you expect out of this? Like, do you expect? I mean, one thing I'll say is somebody who I did hold. I don't hold Azuki now, but I did hold it when the last live event happened, and it was really interesting because I wasn't going to be in the middle of like trying to trade it hardcore, but that was, as everybody remembers, the Check Your Wallets event where beans dropped and it definitely went down. But then I remember the thing I remember about it is I wasn't going to be in the business of like trading right away, but it ended up coming back up relatively quickly. Like I assume that in this instance, we're probably expecting a fair amount of people to be trading out of it pretty quickly. Is that your expectation, or what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think look, we're pretty deep into, the NFT winter. I think a lot of people are really jaded, right? So the going game plan into the event like this is usually claim the airdrop and just dump it, right? And then dump the NFT. I think that you can I think that is a very reasonable base case given the situation that we're in. But what I will say is, they had a year to do this shit. They've had the ability and the benefit of seeing other projects do their own activations and the good and bad that came out of those. So I think look, expectations are super high, but we're in a weird spot right now where I think nothing new has happened in any of the core projects for a while. People are really hungry for it. And you have this really significant capital rotation happening right now within the major projects, right? And you could say look, the capital is going to rotate out, but I just looking at the players here, a capital doesn't really rotate out because you never really leave the asylum. I think I think we're going to have a reordering of the ranks. And there's Azuki's captains, the gods, there's catalysts for all of these projects to kind of shake up the pecking order a little bit. So I think I'm gonna take the contrarian view and just say you're gonna get an initial dump, but the big wallets step in as they usually do for Azuki. Activation overall is good. There's other project holders that are looking to jump ship, and net, I think maybe we're probably stable to up from here.
Okay, that's good to know. Sadie, are you trading this at all, or have you been watching it?
I have not, honestly. I feel like Azuki is one of those things where I can't outcompete guys who have been in it and following it, like Grant and Eric. So I'm very happy to stay on the sidelines and watch. I guess though, for you guys, curious, just given the level of choreography that's gone on here and the expectation, what do you think the over under is on the
On the
team
shitting the
not
bed?
disappointing? Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I kind of think of it as a coin flip, but I think it's also the fact that so much of the big wallets in the space are so pot committed that even
Right.
if it's not that good, they'll kind of say it's great. And it'll feel like mass psychosis, but they'll put their money where their mouth is, and the markets, it'll reflect that in the market price, which if we kind of look a little back a little bit, it's sort of what happened with apes, for a long time. So I think that is my baseline. If it's actually really really good, then obviously I think they're in a really good spot, right? But I think the only case is if it's one of these really, it's a huge unforced error, it alienates the whales, and then the big wallets start to dump, I think then yeah, this project's in trouble because there is a lot of fucking leverage in it.
Grant, do you have a thought on that at all?
Yeah, I think, suspension of disbelief is kind of a whipsaw, right? Like it works really, really well when an idea is fresh, and we're operating in a zero interest rate environment, and one of those things are certainly not true. And Azuki is no longer a new project, so whatever is happening next needs to feel fresh, needs to feel for the whales that it's been worth the wait, and for people waiting on the sidelines, it needs to feel like it's a new dimension. It adds a new dimension to the market.
And the overarching kind of thought is this is going to be some sort of NFT drop, right? Is that kind of where everybody's sitting right now? That like there's going to be an airdrop of something. I assume that this is where no one's expecting Bean at this point, but it would be essentially their MAYC kind of version of it, which they've referred to Beans before as more of their Bored Ape Kennel Club thing. Um, do either of you see a world where when MAYC minted, it was kind of a surprise that the public could mint some too, I think, right? Wasn't there an opportunity for additional mints on top of the ones that were dropped to holders? Do you think that's going to be a thing here at all? Or do you see that this is a holder only drop? And do you think that would be a negative for holders?
I think anything in this market that asks people to put in more money is a negative.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, well let's try to pivot over here before we lose Grant and move over to Yuga and Bored Apes. Obviously, we've seen some significant downward spiraling of their price. I just read a Discord message that Mutant Apes are under 7, which is pretty kind of shocking just from a number standpoint. I think regular apes are in the 37 level. I'm gonna start, Eric. I'm gonna start with you because I think you at one point said that 40 ETH was kind of the Ben Dow liquidation point. Can you explain, have these apes been liquidated and are they getting liquidated or what's going on with that? And then maybe just before we go to other people, while we're still at you, kind of get your take on what's going on.
There's just negative demand right now. And so existing buyers, which for the most part are the bit farmers and market makers, are completely exhausted. You've seen just all of the who's of the major blur bit airdrop farmers come in on this downward drop to try and catch the knife, and they all caught the knife squarely in the face. Got very bloody and proceeded to dump the apes into bids, which then proceeded to go into the next farmer. And so this kind of like this has been happening for a while now, but it's starting to hit a crescendo because you've had, like, outside of the blur farmers, you have Pimp Capital, which is one of the biggest GGOTS whales around, come in and basically drop millions of dollars into the ecosystem to try to support it. You've had actually Franklin come back from his self-imposed exile for a little bit to pump apes, and then he proceeded to just like quickly flip them and drop off. And so like now, like, you're sitting in the situation where it's like Machi, it's Faf, it's like Wallet G, like all of these big farmers, they're just kind of just dropping them on each other. And I think last one I checked, it's Punk's OTC that has a bunch of these apes, and he's liquidating other stuff to kind of close ranks on his books and keep everything moving, right? So now, like, and new buyers, like the ape whales aren't stepping in, no new buyers are stepping into this. You actually, if you look on the listing floor right now on Blur, a lot of OG minters and early buyers that bought sub 10 are now starting to list, which is not something you've seen before. So that's really bad, right? And so it's just like, who's gonna kind of come in and support this? And in addition, there's a lot of inventory right now sitting with the market makers that needs to find a home. Bid walls are really, really thin right now, like up until the mid to low 30s. And on Bend, there's about over 100 apes that have been collateralized that will get liquidated at a sub 40 floor. However, here is the interesting thing about Bend. Their price oracle does not include transactions on Blur. And so on the Bend-DAO price oracle, apes are still 42 and mutants are more than 8 ETH. So none of these have been liquidated, right? And so I'm looking at the situation and I'm just saying, like, this is fucking ridiculous. because they have this jacked up oracle that's not reflective underlying market. And so what's eventually going to happen is nothing happens, everything is okay. It's the boiling frog syndrome. Like it's a boiling frog in boiling water, right? And all of a sudden, when the bids go on Blur and you have no other place to get liquidity and people start to get desperate and start to transact on OpenSea, they start to transact on whatever marketplace they can get volume, that Oracle price is going to gap from 42 to like 36, and all of these are going to go into liquidation. And then the books are going to be bad because realistically, like auction prices are going to clear much, much lower than where they're currently marked at. And so the protocol is going to get in that situation, if this doesn't correct itself, the protocol is going to get left with bad debt, right? So I'm actually like really, really shocked because at this point, I would have expected the lenders on BendDAO to have pulled their money because this is most of the collateral base on the protocol. Like it's if this doesn't kick off a bank run, I don't know what people are doing. Like it's actually insane to me that like systemically we knew that the risk model for peer-to-peer lending was really flawed in this way, and we allowed it to even get to this point. And this is so this is going to be interesting. This is going to be a pain point for our projects because it right now it's just creating a black hole of liquidity around everything. Like clones are getting dumped, moonbirds are getting dumped, doodles are getting dumped, Azukis are getting dumped, penguins are getting dumped. Anything that a major farmer is touching right now is getting dumped. And so that's like it's really ugly, but I think like if you're trading JPEGs, that's probably where your opportunity is, because if you're buying these gap downs into things that have actual organic demand in a week or two, you probably look pretty good.
Grant, I know you got to go. So before you go, I'd love to hear your take on this. I know you've been somebody who's been kind of beating the drum of the liquidations on BendDAO for a bit. What do you think? Is there anything that I guess that Yuga? I mean, at this point, can they do anything, or can apes do anything, or do we feel like kind of? Do you have a price target for where these are going to land up, or any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, it's like calling in the manager for when your burger's messed up at McDonald's. Like, there's nothing that can be done. Just let the market do market things, right? Like, to Eric's point, like the fucking pirate code guy is not letting the market do market things. Like the Oracle's a sham, basically. And it's astonishing that lenders aren't really. I mean, I don't know if they don't care, but maybe they're just not used to monitoring their loans as close because it just wasn't for so long. It just wasn't that volatile market, right? Then yeah, it's just this is what we live for. It's volatility, and you got to pick the assets that are going to bounce the quickest from here. And to me, that's not really Yuga, so I don't really care about that right now.
Yeah, well, because why do you think that's not the case? Like, why do you? Is there any sense that like Yuga, like, well, I guess what I'm asking is like, you don't believe Yuga's going to bounce? Is there a reason?
Well, I just don't think they'll be the fastest to bounce because they have so many different collections. Prices is still the highest. Well, I guess second highest to punks. Which just generally means that you need more liquidity to prop it back up again, right? And some of some of the OG names selling, like the guys who are buying from like 1 to 3 ETH selling, like is just indicative of like there's no one steering the ship, right? Like I wasn't a huge fan of Gordon Goner's ship posting, like the whole hey, let's pump and dump goblins together with people for a night while we're drunk. Like didn't jive with me, but he at least was kind of a central degen voice guiding these guys, and now there's just no one steering the ship, right? And everything feels a little disjointed. Right. They have a new CEO, a whole new C-suite that feels really, really corporate and disconnected from everyone. There's these sham elections going on for the special counsel and whatever else who are completely overpaid and underqualified, and they just don't have well-defined roles. So it just feels like a very, very bloated operation. And it's just like, even if I were an excited newcomer who wanted to learn about NFTs and dive in, like what's the impetus for me to buy an ape, right? Because 2 years ago, Post Malone got paid money on the table to rep it in his YouTube video, or what's the case for it? Truly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest, my biggest kind of knock against them right now is that the idea of social signaling by owning an ape in some form, whether you're a person that does it or not, but if you are a person that does that, like the social signal right now is you got stuck with with an asset that went down in value by whatever, 50% or more. And I don't think it's a great social signal. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that are looking to signal that. And what I think is funny, as we've always said, is on the way up, it's like ugly. It's an ugly ape, and then it becomes this incredible piece of art. Well, we got to
It's
see
so
what it looks
clean.
like. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so
so
clean,
clean,
man.
so
So
clean.
clean.
But we got to look at what you think of these mutants now when they're like, down from whatever it was at one point. I think 22 or something like that. I will say the thing that's always really tricky about this particular project is that they played the give us free money game better than almost anybody else in that I think if you were an OG ape holder, I think there's some number out there and whether or not this is true, like, $500,000 essentially in airdrops plus NFTs, plus, with the ape that you got, depending on when you were going to sell it, if you sold it. And that's like an insane return on value, right? So the question just becomes is like, actually, I have one question, and Grant, if you have to go, I get it. But I have one question, and maybe at a Sadiano, maybe you can think of this. Is one of the things I've thought a lot about with apes is they kind of front loaded all of the value of what they would be as an investment in the beginning of the stages of the company, in that the value essentially from these NFTs has been these additional NFTs or the coins that come out of it. My bigger kind of overall question is in the like Ponzi model that kind of ape started, is it just like mid to late stage these companies just don't have value? Like is there just no value in this at this point? Like I think that obviously Yuga's trying to build a gaming company, but it's hard to see. The thing I keep coming back to with Yuga and gaming is in order to make a gaming business, you have to charge for it or sell it into it or have ads in some way. And you're not going to be able to charge any holders to play whatever game comes out because they're getting these drops as part of owning their thing. So I don't know, Sadie, this is maybe a larger question, but like, I assume this is maybe like the Ponzi model finally coming to a stop. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I always say that everything is a shitcoin chart. It's just a matter of time frame. And so what you described is literally a shitcoin chart. You have the big sort of like lead up and then recovery bounce that everyone thinks is going to take off. And then, it kind of like fades into oblivion slowly, trying to reinvent itself or whatever. I think that's probably true of almost every asset class. It's just a matter of time frame.
Yeah.
I think your other question, which is like, can an NFT project become a business? Is also a interesting question with implications for the broader crypto space, which is kind of thing that's fundamentally predicated on being counterculture,
Yeah.
become mainstream without inciting the derision of like the people who sponsored it in the first place, right? It's like an emo band that like all of a sudden goes mainstream and you hate them, but also that was kind of the point. And I think there's like a little bit of that going on in the space too.
Those emo bands, when they go mainstream, sell a shitload of records, right? So
Yeah,
the
like
question
Fall Out
is,
Boy played MSG and like
yeah,
they fucking sold out. And so I do think there is this question of like if you lose your original base just by virtue of going mass market, like does that work? And I think it's really challenging.
yeah, that makes sense. Eric, do you have a thought on this at all before we move on to something
Yeah,
else?
I mean, there's just the Yuga ecosystem just has a lot of shit in it, right? And
Yeah.
I think the reason they work well was that there's a halo around the product because it had the desirable perception of mainstream appeal, right? And they offered a lot of utility in the sense that they were giving holders free money, like whether it was free mutants, whether it was the Kenos, whether it was the Ape coin drop, right? Like so they front loaded all of the utility and now they're pivoting to gaming. But the problem, we talked about this ad nauseum, takes time to really build gaming. And to a degree, if you're trying to build a gaming platform to get mass adoption, having to constantly cater to like a 10,000 collection and making sure they're taken care of is almost a liability. And
Yeah.
so now you go with NFTs falling out of, kind of getting kicked out of the zeitgeist a little bit. They're not as cool anymore. And so now you've gone from a luxury NFT to a utility NFT, which is basically about as graceful as going from an Hermes handbag to a John Deere leaf blower, right? Like that's not that reevaluation process is ugly. You don't want to be in that spot. And I think Yuga is kind of in that situation where they are trying to pivot to a real business and grow up and build real product, right? And they're putting real effort into it. Like they hired a real, they hired a real CEO from Activision, and they're like every other day they're announcing senior hires, but in the meantime, you just have these like, almost 6-figure monkey JPEGs that don't do a whole lot, right? And people are waiting for the next thing.
And by the way, have done a lot already. They've, I mean,
Yeah,
in terms of,
they've already done a lot. So
yeah.
what's there for, the incremental buyer? What's next, right? Because now you have opportunity cost. You can cash this chip in for 35 ETH, which is still almost $70,000. You can wait for the next thing, right? But if you don't think the next thing is going to be worth very much, like then you're like, okay, like what am I kind of in it for? You have to make a rational, calculated decision. And so I think like that's sort of where we're at, right? And there is like a scenario where Yuga is wildly successful, but apes are like 20 ETH. Like it's just, I think it just becomes like, what do you really want to do next, right? And there's nothing, and that the quote unquote DAO and their governance is a fucking joke. Like it's like those are that entire governance process is about like what I would expect out of a Banana Republic regime in Latin America. So which is to say, like, everyone's just out for it themselves, right? And there's nothing really benefits the coders. It's just a huge value extraction mechanism for Horizon Labs and the people that sit on the special council. So it's that this is the tough spot, right? And if you're looking to get into NFTs or you're looking to rotate, maybe there's better places to park your money. I don't know.
I would just add one thing, which is like in a week that really has been kind of predicated on the market, both crypto and also TradFi, realizing that the SEC is serious. There is this SEC overhang in Yuga too, which I think is maybe being underappreciated in terms of price impact.
Yeah, it's an unregistered security. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, look, I think that became clear, right? And so now they have no lever. There's no ability to do what even they've done historically. If the SEC's case is kind of becomes generally accepted as the interpretation of the law, and so I think that's probably having a meaningful valuation impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would also say, like, well, here's a question. And again, Grant, if you want to, before I go on, Grant, do you have a thought you want to give and then jump out? Because I know you got to catch your flight.
I can probably stay on like 5 more minutes, but yeah, I'll just say like months ago I said, I think on this pod that the one thing that they actually did right was buy low on the historical NFT that actually mattered, which was CryptoPunks, right? And how CryptoPunks fell from grace was from the counterculture NFT to being overpriced, and their community base being out of touch, contrasted against what was cool at the time, which was Bored Apes, right? And it's funny to see not necessarily the roles reversed, but certainly the winner of the last cycle kind of falling out of favor and falling from grace in real time in front of us. So in I don't know, 2 to 3 years time, I would not be surprised if they crash in on that chip to save other pieces of the burning wreckage of this bloated corporation.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, because part of that deal was didn't they get the 1,000 punks too that Larva had minted originally? Am I crazy? Is that part of the deal? Maybe. I don't know. We'll figure it out later. Great. Okay, that's good. I think we should move on. Obviously, there's some big news that's going on in the TradFi/crypto world as well. I do want to talk about BlackRock a little bit because I think this is really interesting, and I think we have people who have some experience in this space. Okay, I'll start with Sadie. I'll start with you as somebody who's spent her career at least significantly, mostly in this kind of world. what does BlackRock mean in this instance, and does it matter versus other people who have tried to do these things before? Because I think the argument is many people have tried to do Bitcoin ETFs and they weren't able to get them through, but then people are saying because it's BlackRock, it makes a difference. Is that true?
No, it's not true in that way. It's not because it's BlackRock. But what I would say is that there's a significant level of work that's gone into these filings, and it's not just BlackRock. Other folks have filed too. And I don't think, and this is just my opinion, I don't know, but I don't think you would do that unless you had a conversation that indicated that the changes you made versus the prior iterations would be appropriate and approved.
Right.
I don't think you get this sort of wave without some sort of back channel communication that says like, yeah, this is sufficient. This resolves our concerns around, market manipulation of Bitcoin price. And there is some new mechanics. It frankly is not hugely robust versus what existed before, which is interesting, right? Like, I think perhaps this is the way the SEC is sort of thinking about people accessing crypto safely, given all of the ways to access it directly have been operating in contravention of securities law, the way they interpret it. And so it's really interesting. It's all happened at once. But no, it's not because it's BlackRock. BlackRock is not. Crypto was the industry that wanted its own laws. BlackRock is just good at abiding by the ones that exist and knows who to talk to and how to sort of tweak existing structures to achieve kind of everyone's aims.
That makes sense. You had mentioned I think it was in our last show, where the idea that once securities, once they could, there's a world where crypto is basically deemed security, that traditional money could finally come in. Do you feel like this ETF will allow traditional money to come in before that point? Like, if this goes through, do you see a lot of money coming into the crypto space through it?
So my point then, and I truly think that regulatory clarity, including, to the extent that certain cryptocurrencies are deemed securities, would be massively bullish, just because there's an entire kind of ecosystem that springs up around securities, right? This is a little bit of an intermediate step because I would say it's more in line with like a gold ETF. So the structure is a trust that holds the Bitcoin, akin to the way like the Spider Gold ETF works, and then it trades as an ETF. So it's a little bit of a hybrid structure. I would say the appropriate analogy for this structure is sort of a commodity, and it seems like they think it will be approved. So that's actually interesting insofar as we have like a direct analogy in gold in terms of how they've set it up. I think for other cryptocurrencies, it'll be interesting to see what sort of analogies get approved.
So you're telling me I should go all in on ordinals right now? That's the plan, because it's the only one we can guarantee will be around for a bit.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this and I haven't really come to a conclusion, but certainly there will be winners and losers as people move from self-custody to owning through ETFs that, you can redeem anytime, open-ended funds, hopefully that track relatively close to the price of Bitcoin, though they might not. And so there's certainly be winners and losers. What I would say is that some of it will be intuitive and some of it might not. Certainly BlackRock is not out there buying everyone's Bitcoin, contrary to the CT meme. They'll only buy Bitcoin to the extent that people contribute their money to the ETF.
Right. That makes sense. But I guess they're essentially I mean, this again is from, smooth brain me, but like they're essentially, by kind of putting their name attached to it in some ways, I would imagine that there is a level of assurance that a company like BlackRock trusts a crypto coin, even if it's just Bitcoin, and that people assume in the world that that's going to bring more people in, correct?
I think so. I think it's a way for institutions to own Bitcoin if they want to own Bitcoin. And it's also a way for people to build on top of it. So you could conceivably wind up with mutual funds that hold various crypto, or, there's demand for ETFs as securities themselves.
Right. Okay.
So I think that's particularly interesting. I would say one somewhat unresolved question is this question of custody. There's been a lot of like gotcha type tweets around like, oh, Coinbase is doing the custody. I don't really think that's a big deal. Nobody's claiming that Coinbase's custody services or in violation of any laws. But BlackRock probably is not used to the level of security that's required in order to keep a like giant pot of Bitcoin safe. And there was a custodian hack this week, and so I think this will be a space to watch. And there's been a lot of action in TradFi this week around custody in general, with certain of the Epstein cases, and then another case involving a hedge fund manager in the UK, where the custodian basically told the business that they refused to custody their assets, and it fell apart in a week. This is a big hedge fund. And so I think custody will be a little bit of an interesting space, potentially for investment and certainly to watch.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's also the stuff with Prime Trust City where basically they've been accused of running a Ponzi scheme and not having sufficient assets to cover redemptions. So at the same time, TUSD has also frozen withdrawals and redemptions of that stablecoin, and that's a stablecoin with $3 billion of float out there right now.
Oof, that's frozen right now?
Yeah, it froze this morning. Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't hear that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oof. Brutal.
The hack was that I think it was earlier this week. Was that the custodian was hacked and it was kept. I don't think crypto Twitter really noticed, but
no, they announced it. Crypto Twitter didn't care.
I think we should stop paying attention to crypto Twitter. How about that? I mean, that's the hardest thing, right? It's like none of them, everybody's going to say, it's almost like 1,000 monkeys, right? If you type enough stuff on typewriters, eventually one of them is going to produce something worthwhile. But there's just so many voices that are so diverse and different in what their takes are. It's like, of course, somebody other is going to be right. But in general, it's just people looking for attention. Eric, where do you sit on this Bitcoin ETF? Do you think it's a significant deal, or do you think it's something that's kind of being overblown?
I mean, it's good because reputable institutions are coming into the space. It's not going to happen tomorrow, right? And so I kind of look at these tweets of people like, "Oh, we're going to like 50,000 Bitcoin or 100,000. Get ready." You know, it's the same assholes that were a week ago were like, "Oh, it's all over. See you at 15,000." They don't. They just these processes take time. It takes time to onboard. There are clear advantages towards some of these traditional trust structures. Particularly if institutions want to own, they can just buy this ETF and not necessarily have to custody their own Bitcoin, which is a big plus. I think like this is good, right? In the long time frame, it's good, and I think dispels some of this notion that like existing institutions are not crypto friendly. I think there is an aspect of this where existing institutions clearly recognize the importance of crypto, but they actually are trying to figure out how to do it within like adherence of the law. Whereas, to Sadie's point, in some cases, I do feel like this case where a lot of, VC funded crypto companies, they kind of just say, well, we're just going to do this shit. And then eventually like we'll just make laws that work for us. And that's not necessarily how it's going to work.
Right.
And I think it lead to honestly some really fucking disgusting fact patterns. So I think over time, this is good, right? But you got to look at it in the high time frame. Like you're trading 5 minutes charts, like, yeah, I don't know what this is going to tell you, man.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And I also think like, I think people in Bitcoin always talk about the halvening, which the halvening, what is it? Who knows how to pronounce it? A halvening or halfening?
I think it's
Either of you know that?
I don't know. I tried to stay away from Bitcoin maxis.
Anyway, that happens, I think, at some point early next year. And I've heard multiple people tell me, well, like 9 months out from the Bitcoin happening, this is where it starts to go. And what's so interesting about Bitcoin is that everybody just has their theories now because, there's all these different data sets that people have created. And it just is like the weirdest world that we live in here, and how people see growth and non-growth. And then the funny thing is it just all comes on the backs of what Bitcoin does. So there's always that aspect of it too. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting. I think that obviously, I think institutional investors, as we've talked about on this show a bunch of times, is something that feels like a big deal. Whether or not, it will be, we'll see, or how long it's going to take. But I think the biggest thing is it's not going to happen overnight. I did want to talk about one more thing that I had to dive into because I wrote something on it this week that I'm kind of curious if either of you have kind of dove into. Um, did you all see the Nike the .swoosh Fortnite announcement? Did you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so just so everybody's listening, if you're not familiar, .swoosh is Nike's kind of like mainstream Web3 play. I'm literally writing a very long piece on this right now, so I know quite a bit about it. But like essentially, it's not Artifact. You know, Nike bought Artifact, CloneX maker. It's not them. They started an entirely new Web3 division that is kind of like designed to be a mainstream. In fact, they've gone as far as like part of their methodology was like to educate a bunch of people on what it was when they first started. They launched a thing called R Force One, which are Polygon NFTs of virtual sneakers. And then just this week, they announced an integration with Fortnite, where in Fortnite, in a Fortnite world, not in main Fortnite, but in a Fortnite world, you could get you could get a digital pair of sneakers in Fortnite. They weren't one of the R Force Ones, but you could also then get if you completed this event or you did participate in it, you could get a soul-bound NFT to your .swoosh wallet. And I've been thinking a lot about this, and one of the interesting things, I think it's kind of getting underplayed in the general Web3 world. And I think my take on this mostly is that these are not worth any money at all, and they were $20 NFTs, and they're not tradable right now. But I think that it is interesting to me to see a company like Nike start to open the door to like a slightly different version of what an NFT could be. Now, this is very different than the kind of NFTs that we might talk about on this podcast mostly, which are high value tradable assets that are going to go for a lot, or they're going to move a lot. But this is like a kind of like maybe what NFTs ultimately will be and should be. I don't know. So Eric, what's your thoughts on the .swoosh kind of world and what's going on with that stuff?
I mean, it's pretty cool. It's a Nike NFT that's, that's not the creepy Lolita dolls. So that's great. Obviously I don't think the shoes are tradable, which I think is fine because we're just, this is early. I think they're treading carefully around it because they're very protective of the brand. Fortnite is obviously very protective of the brand, and there's obviously regulatory concerns on the back end of this as well that you would want clarification on. But yeah, like as an engagement tool, as a rewards program, I think it makes a lot of sense. And this is where, to your point, Funky, we're kind of like breaking open the idea of like utility reward based NFTs that are soul bound, not tradable, not
Yeah.
monetizable, but do confer certain benefits, right? And that's brand like that actually creates sticky brand engagement. It creates brand loyalty, which is everything that
That Yuga doesn't have, right? It's everything that Yuga doesn't have,
yeah.
which is fascinating to me. Like that's what's so interesting about this. Like it's like Yuga's assets were worth so much money, and now they're in a position where the brand loyalties are really tricky and they don't have anything else to deliver. And on the opposite side, these Nike NFTs essentially they're $20 each, but for this space, essentially free, but they're not tradable. And yet I believe weirdly much more so in this Nike roadmap than I do in whatever Yuga has coming up next,
Yeah, because it's got Nike behind it, right?
Yeah.
That's a real name. And so we're all sort of going to pay attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the other thing that we didn't talk about was, and it was kind of a similar vein, right? Was LV selling the $41,000 soul-bound trunks that
Yeah.
basically do the exact same thing much more explicitly. Like you can I think the idea of spending $41,000 to be friends with Farouk is frankly speaking a very unpleasant thought. But I think the spirit of it is of the idea is really, really cool. And I could see down the road once the concept of this type of benefit becomes much more mainstream, like that there's going to be real demand there, across
Yeah.
a lot of brands for some stuff like this. So that's awesome.
Sadie, what do you think about this world? I mean, on one hand, it kind of is the opposite of the trading space, right? Because it's thinking about NFTs as something totally different. But on the other hand, there is a world where it opens the door to a lot more people to kind of understand digital assets and digital things. Like, you think this is a good thing? Do you care about it? Is it something that matters to you?
Yeah, I think it's great. I have two thoughts. The first is that Nike does something that Yuga is desperate to do, which is create things people just want to own,
Mhm.
not speculate on, not invest in, not trade, not lever, just own. And I think that's going to be the evolution of our space, right? It won't be an unregulated casino forever, or at least not for the majority of the people who use it. It will be the utility will not be in its future value. You're not going to value it on forward earnings. You're going to evaluate it based on like something you want to buy. And I think, ultimately that is how the industry creates enduring value, like Nike has brand value, but also just stuff like stuff people want to have. And so I think that in some ways provides a somewhat aspirational roadmap for companies that are set up by degens who don't know how to create stuff with enduring value.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the other thing is that I think there's like a perception that the investment opportunity or the upside will decrease as the industry moves toward a less investor casino centric focus. And I think that is fundamentally short-sighted. The reality is, with a ton more eyeballs and dollars, the potential return on capital is massive. You just need to be a little bit more creative. It's just not all going to be on OpenSea.
Yeah. I also think, by the way, there's an argument that, and I've said this before, I think that any sort of time you introduce the idea of these digital assets to say a 10x audience, of that 10x audience, let's just take 1,000 people and you 10x that to 10,000 people, of that 90,000 new people, maybe 500 of those people might fall into the world of the stuff that we care about, right? And because they're introduced to it. I think we talked about this a while back when I remember when the Trump NFTs came out, and I recognized there were a couple people from that had come into the world from the Trump NFTs that were suddenly trading NFTs. And like, there is just an argument for the growing of the pie of people who understand how these things work. I want to ask one thing, Sadie, when you say it may not all be on OpenSea, do you mean that it may be on other chains, or that they might be things that are like custodial wallets, or things that like you have to find somewhere else? Like, what do you mean by not on OpenSea? That it's not an Ethereum NFT? Like, what are you thinking?
I think I just mean that you have to think more broadly about how to monetize or invest behind technologies you believe in when those technologies are actually creating shit people want. If it's just creating vaporware stuff that you can trade, it tends to concentrate liquidity. So, you can go on NFT Nerds and like see what people are buying. I think ultimately the world doesn't look like that. Like there's no way I can go on a website and like see what companies are trading privately, right? Or see, who's raising money or whatever. Like that requires like a more sophisticated level of understanding of the world, and like eventually crypto will get there too. And the opportunity in that context is just massive for people that have been there. But I do think there's a little bit of a resistance to kind of getting over that hump and maturing because it feels like the opportunities to make money are fewer. But I actually don't think it's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crypto is interesting because we sometimes like build stuff backwards, right? And NFTs are I think a good example of that, where we basically went ahead and built StockX, and we're like, well, now maybe it's time to like actually for somebody to
Build the
make shoes
shoes.
that somebody will want. And so it's I think we're getting to this phase where like everything is super mercenary, super financialized. But so the financial layer is there, but there's no fucking product, right? And this is
I was gonna
not
say it's more like we built the stock market and there were no companies, so we just decided to throw some pictures up and trade those.
It's just like I don't know how many of these Arbitrum DeFi protocols that I white papers that I've gone through where it's super complicated math. They're doing like delta neutral vault strategies and derivatives, like basically off of just to kind of create like, because everyone's like, oh yeah, the derivative market is like a $3 trillion market, but it's like, dude, the derivative market,
of what? That's the question,
exactly.
Right?
The derivative market is a $3 trillion market because there's one like a really robust system of financial primitives that are also one like just based on like the fundamental the day-to-day interactions that a normal human being does to be productive, to consume, right? And you don't have that. And so like it's just all financial engineering, and Sadie probably knows better than anyone that like when it's just pure financial engineering, like what the ultimate outcome of that is. So yeah, like you know, it's great. Like we kind of need to see, we need to see product first, like that kind of companies that take a product first principle to their approach and build into this space. It's just the founders that we have right now, I would just say it, are not fucking it. You know,
Yeah.
like yeah, I just I know you like Kevin. He seems like a very reasonable human being. But the tweet today, my God, like it's just I don't know how you could be any more tone deaf. Like, you know, like come on, dude. Like rumors are under mint. Like the people are dangling on the vine. Your holders are in shambles, and you don't have to like. Do you really like perceive yourself as this fountainhead type of like figure from an Ayn Rand story who's like, you know, in the trenches, like, you know, going sticking to his principles despite the world being totally around. Like, come on. Like
Yeah.
you're a rich dude living in LA and you raised a lot of money for an NFT project that is floundering. Like
Well, I will
let's
say,
put things into perspective a little bit.
yeah, one of the interesting things I learned in this .swoosh project paper I've been working on is the guy Ron Ferris is the guy who's in charge of .swoosh over at Nike. Came from Virgin. He was like a marketing product guy, and he kind of ran a kind of small digital studio within Virgin, and that then got purchased, like got basically acqui-hired through Nike. And one of the interesting things is he was put in charge of the sneakers app, which if either of you have ever used the sneakers app, at one point it was just a garbage fest. It was just like everything that was wrong with NFTs that we see wrong with NFTs was what was wrong with sneakers. And like purposely is somebody who we talk about the B team and the C team in this space. And you know, as you said, I like Kevin a lot, and I believe Kevin is not a B or C team, but I think he's definitely made some mistakes. But Ron is one of these people who feels like an adult in the room, right? In some ways, like he's been through stuff, like he's kind of been in a person. So you have in this .swoosh. And by the way, I'm not saying .swoosh had some issues as well too, like they had tech issues and a lot of other things, but it feels like there's an adult in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, like to build real shit, you know. I to Yuga's credit, right? Like they did hire an adult to
Yeah.
run the company, but like it's the dude just got off garden leave, so it, you know, I'm not saying apes are dead, but like it's you got to be patient.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. All right. We should wrap it up. This has been a great episode. Anything either of you want to mention or looking forward to? I'm assuming the Azuki event. Anything else that's kind of on the horizon, Sadie, that you're interested in right now?
It's funny, actually. I've been thinking about something you said a few minutes ago, which I thought was really fucking eloquent. Which says you built the stock market, but there weren't any companies, so we just threw some pictures up there, and which is like a perfect encapsulation of what the last like 10 years in crypto. But what I would say is like I'm excited to see what we throw up there now. I think it's
Oh,
going to be
that's
dope.
interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I think that's really interesting. Eric, what about you? Anything you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have, you know, obviously on the NFT Ponzi, we have some major activations coming up. But I am really interested to see how the regulatory framework develops, right? Because as we're going through what's happening within the US, you know, MICA is going to place in Europe. Hong Kong is putting forward their own framework, right? Like so the regulatory rails are starting to be put into place for guys to actually do this. I do sincerely believe that, you know, the US government will, legislators in the US will too. And it's not, you can't marry yourself to this idea that like they're just going to be inherently adversarial to crypto forever.
Yeah.
I think it just requires like some self-reflection on what crypto actually is today. And you have to kind of think about like what you actually want it to be as an end state and the things you want to see and the things that you do not want to see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I think, for sure.
So you know, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic for the first time in a while.
Wow, that's exciting to hear. That's you always love to hear I'm optimistic 12 to 16 months into a bear market.
I think it's going to be a few more bank runs and then up only.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Fantastic. Why don't we wrap it up there? A few more bankrupts and then up only. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Mid Curve podcast. We never know how often we're going to do this. Oftentimes one of us is missing. So we hope to try to do these every week. We'll hopefully be back again next week. This is a time I think we're going to stick with now. I was the problem the last time, and I won't be a problem again going forward. But good luck to Grant in Vegas, and Sadie and Eric, I'll see you next week.
Yeah. See you guys soon.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, guys.